Cool. So, welcome, guys, to the One Step Away podcast. We're all here today, and we'll continue to be with you, the listeners, and eventually the viewers, because as it says in our bios, as it says in our promos, it's time. I'm sure everyone else will agree with me. It's time. It's time to build.
We agree, my man.
Yeah. It's time to build. It's time to come together. It's time to have those honest conversations. It's time to let the young men and women know that what they're starting to feel now is what we've already felt and what's what we feel. It's time for the older generation to kind of know what we're now starting to feel as kind of men now, what they've felt. Like we can relate to those. So it's about bringing those generations together. So welcome once again. It's our pilot as well. But we want to change the narrative where there's no more silence, because how often do you get to hear or see 6 black men talking about their feelings? So
yes, and I just want to say as well from this side that I'm blessed that I'm sitting here with all my brothers, you know what I mean? And we're going to be bringing through the sisters at some point. We're going to be bringing through some guests at some point, you know what I mean? What I will say as well is that having a platform in order to speak and let off your piece without any pressure of someone oppressing your mind, oppressing your voice or anything is such a blessing, because I'm so used to having to shut my mouth when I have to. Now I feel I can speak freely, and that's called liberation. I'm loving that.
100%. And I guess we've all been brought here together. We were discussing earlier. This is like 20 years in the making. Like we've had this, the longest friendship we've had is like 20 years of life experiences. So this format probably, it's been 10 years in the making, actually wanting to sit down. We talk about this stuff all the time. We talk all the time. So this isn't a knee-jerk reaction to kind of the current events in the world, which we care about dearly. And we have our own thoughts and opinions, which you'll get to know and understand as the episodes go on. But this is something that we've always wanted to do. And we just, I guess, maybe current situations has been a catalyst or kind of just made us more ready and prepped and aware. But either way, we're here now.
Right.
I guess a lot of viewers, listeners will want to kind of understand, why is it One Step Away? Why is it One SAF? Like, what's a peculiar podcast name? For us, it's not. Kay, if you could, would you like to kind of just explain to our viewers and listeners just an understanding of the name of our podcast?
So I will do a classic cooking show. This is what I made earlier type situation. And I have prepared for this, of course. So I want to read this out. So quite simply, One Step Away From was originally termed during a conversation between me and my brothers, which resulted in a statement where we, as black men, are always one step away from jail or one step away from the graveyard. This evolved over discussion and quickly became a format for realization, where we are always one step away from undesirable outcomes, and equally are several steps away from desirable outcomes. So quite simply, it's easier for people from our background to meet negative ends for whatever reason, and harder for us to meet positive ends. So this became our slogan, our phrase, and now an organized group to share our thoughts, feelings, and enter into critical discussion. We are one step away from, and through this platform, we plan to inverse the steps in this sense, for people from our cultural background to be one step away from desirable outcomes and several steps away from undesirable outcomes. That is one step away from.
Yeah, man. Boom, bam. That is exactly how it is. You know what I mean? So all I'd say to our listeners is you'll learn a lot about us. You'll learn to love us. You'll learn to probably maybe hate us. You'll learn to rate us.
You hate me.
You learn to understand us. But the most important thing of this podcast is, even though history has tried to mold us otherwise, is that we are human. We do have deep feelings, thoughts. Don't get it twisted. We are all strong black men, but there's also another side that often gets overlooked due to key stereotypes. And we don't want the next generation to go through that same cycle. So yeah, thank you for that, Kay. So I want to get straight into it because I've been speaking quite a lot. We need to flesh out and kind of give our listeners and viewers an understanding of where we come from, because there needs to be a reason. There's a reason why we're here as men, and it starts from just, in my opinion, growing up. It starts from just going through life experiences. So my question to the group, to the boys, just so people can understand where we're coming from, and so we can set the scene, give a flavor for what we're going to be speaking about today, but also moving forward in future episodes, because we are here to stay. I want to go around the group and just get a feel, just starting maybe from, let's start from home life first. So maybe we'll break it up: home, school, work, relationships, leisure. Let's start from home. Like, I don't jump in, whoever wants to start first, but what are those, the first experiences that kind of made you the person you are, makes you feel, maybe you've experienced racism from an early age, maybe your experience just feeling different from an early age, but just understanding what the black experience
If I could
is.
jump in here.
Go for it.
Yeah, I understood that I wasn't British from an early age. Now, what I mean by that, we didn't have no flags of England in the home and such. We had flags of our homeland, or our, I guess, given homeland, but we'll get into that in a different conversation. I understood that I wasn't British from early, and it didn't mean just because you got a passport, because you got a birth certificate, or because you were born in a British English hospital that you were accepted as British. I learned that was different from day one. Just the way that my family done things, in terms of gatherings, in terms of music, food, in terms of the way we speak, in terms of experiences from my ancestors. I knew that I had a different start. It was coined, I believe, when it was later. I remember this song. I was born with a silver spoon. I should remember that song. Now, the reason why I say that, the reason why I say that is because the spoon that I realized that I was born with was a wooden spoon, if a spoon at all. And the silver spoon and the golden spoon was attributed to those that had a hereditary background, whether it was financial or just by length of time and generation that you were able to go back into. Now, that was a major thing for me. I looked at my own household and I looked at my friends' household who were from different cultural backgrounds, and they just lived different. They just lived different. Those who were from my own cultural background, such as you lot, you lived the same as me. So I knew there was something different about me and my family from day one, just by the way we lived. And that culture doesn't mean if you're part of that country, you automatically adopt their culture. Culture is within each household, man. And that's what I learned from being a younger.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go. I think growing up as a child in a Bayesian household, family was a massive thing. Like, it's almost like you're home from home. So everything you do here in these aisles had a knock-on effect at home. So whether you're the top earner in the family, you're sending money home. I'm sure we've all made barrels and sent home. Do you know what I mean? So it was always, that was growing up. That was me. I was in the middle seat going to Gatwick Airport to go and pick up the relatives that came over for 6 weeks at a time. Do you know what I mean? I had no choice. Bedroom gone. Do you know what I mean? If I had football on a Saturday, nope, we're going to Wembley Market. All them things there. So like, family was always paramount. It had its pros and cons, as Kay said. That's a conversation for another time. But that was my foundation, and that has stood with me through thick and thin, up and downs. That has always been a thing for me. So yeah, that's where I would like to start with my foundation. Came from there.
Cool.
I'll jump on the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, I come from a Caribbean background, and like what has been reiterated, you know, was always made aware of my Caribbean background. And you know, my father would often buy the Gleaner, which was an old school Jamaica paper, and he would send me, as a little boy, I'd run across the road and he'd say, go and buy the Gleaner for me, and I'd run across and buy it. And you know, he'd often read, I think he was reminiscing, because obviously he was reminiscing of the old times in the Caribbean. And I think by buying that newspaper kind of made him it tied his roots, so
Yeah.
to speak. And, you know, food was a large thing in our family as well, you know, soup on a Saturday, rice and peas on a Sunday, that sort of stuff. And so that's really what ties, you know, my identity. And yeah, that's me.
Okay, Dace, if I can jump in now. So for myself, my background was a lot different to you guys. Obviously, I wasn't born here. So the foundation I had to adapt once I came over to this country. And I never thought I was different from when I was born until I came over. And my parents had to actually sit me down and sort of lay down the rules as to why we have to act a certain way and why things are different. So upon being told that and having a culture shock of a new country, a new way of doing things, trying to settle in, going into school, I felt lost in a way, because I had to, in my mind, I was saying to myself, right, you've got to get rid of everything that you know and start afresh. But it wasn't until 3-4 years down the line I realized, no, I didn't need to lose anything. All I needed to do was to adapt. So merge the two together and find my own way of dealing with things. Still kept in touch with my roots, still was calling back home to my friends, my family. Like all you guys, family is important to us. And that's one thing that was drilled into me from a very, very young age. And up to now, we're still keeping in touch with that. So yeah, I had a different experience, but it sort of made me who I am now. And yeah, grateful for it.
Cool. Jay.
Cool. Like T said, I wasn't born in the UK. I spent most of my childhood in the Caribbean. So I wasn't aware that I was different because everyone around me looked like me for the most part, even though my family is what most people would call a mixed family. If you look at my family, we all different shades, and we all have different mixes of ethnicity. So race growing up for me was never an issue. Like, I played with my cousins that were what some people would call white, and etc. I didn't realize I was quote unquote black until I came to the UK, and that's when I realized, oh, I am actually different from everyone. I'm seen differently, and like all our parents told us, we have to be different to be accepted or to try and excel in the British society, in the British cultures. We have to maneuver differently. So, like I said, growing up, being black wasn't a issue for me until I came to the UK and I realized, okay, I am black, I am different, and I have to be careful how I act. I have to be careful how I approach certain things. So that's my experience and my foundation from my childhood. So yeah, going forward, it molded me to act a certain way because I had to.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's parts of all of your experiences that I can relate to. Apart from maybe not, I guess, being born in the UK is different to being born outside. So for me, I think we all mentioned about feeling different or being different at certain times, and that was echoed to me from my parents or from my mum growing up. The perception of having to just being told from a young age you have to be. It was like when we look back at it now, it's basically our parents were just preparing us, trying to protect us, if that makes sense. Like saying things like having to work harder, or twice as hard, sometimes more, I'm sure. Why it's important to stay out of trouble. And I'm sure as a parent, and a parent myself, like, they're things that you tell to any child, but there was a hidden, or there was another dimension to why, for me, what I believe anyway, why I'm being told this, and that was because of my color. I have to work harder because of my color. I have to stay out of trouble more so because if I do get picked up or from the police or anything like that, I'm probably gonna be treated a lot more harshly in this country. But when you're a parent, you have to convert those conversations to young children. You have to kind of install those kind of little bits of awareness in your mind, in your children's minds. But I guess you can't have those full-blown conversations until you come of age. And I guess to culminate, for me feeling okay, and we'll get onto schools in a second, I'm different from my peer group, is when there was an introduction of actually understanding Black history, and my mum like took getting all of our children sitting around and going, right guys, this is some of our history, and mapping that out. So segueing on to the next stage of when you grow up, school life, like for me, I think this podcast, I think us as Black men, this is going to probably be eye-opening for even other Black men across the UK and across the world, because our circumstance, what people need to understand is the Black experience is different depending on where you are geographically. So for me, when you don't live in like an inner city or major city, normally a lot of times within your school environment growing up, there's only a few other Black children or children that look like you in the school. So immediately, okay, whether you're conscious of it or whether the other children are conscious of it, which I think they are, but that's another conversation. This now is the next stage of my journey, is actually not being around people that look like me. So I can relate when it comes to playing sport and stuff like that. But as it was mentioned before by Kay, in terms of when you actually come out of that school environment and you go to your friends' homes and you're like, oh, well, this is different, or this is different. That's when there starts becoming more of a, okay, we're operating differently, we're working differently. And also my mum's told me I've got to work harder because of X, Y, and Z. So next question, I guess, for everyone is, what was school like for you guys? Like from early school to even maybe moving up to kind of secondary school?
For me, I went to school in London, East London. So that was when I first came to this country. I remember it was funny. My mum brought me over because my mum came over first, and she brought me over. It was summer holidays, so she brought me over to spend the summer holidays in the UK. And I remember coming up to the end of August, I already had a return ticket, and I remember packing my bags and saying, "Well, I'm ready to go back to the Caribbean." And she goes to me, she goes, "No, you're staying." And I remember that absolutely crushing me because I was looking so forward, looking to go back to school. But I went to primary school in East London, and for the most part, it was, I would say, a lot of it was like Black and ethnic minorities, a lot of Asians, a lot of Black Caribbeans, a lot of Black Africans. There was a few whites, but in the area I lived in, it was what some people would class as the hood or the ghetto at that time. So primary school for me, I never really I was okay. What would you call it? I climatized pretty quickly and assimilated myself into school life, made new friends. It wasn't only until I moved to the rural area in Suffolk where I realized in school that being Black would have been an issue just by the school that I originally applied for, that I was in the catchment area for, which was some people would say is like a bougie posh school. I wouldn't call it, but I remember going. I remember going to there to see it, and not really seeing anyone that looked like me, and the whole staff. No, there was no one on the staff that looked like me. And eventually, I didn't even get into that school anyway. And I generally think it's because one, I was Black, and two, I came from London and a bad area. But the secondary school I did found, well, most of us in this group went to school together, so it was good. I had a good secondary experience. A few little bits of racism that was dealt with, but yeah, secondary school made it through. That's the best way I could put it.
So as for myself, it was quite a tough adjustment coming from Africa, and then I was at a boarding school there, coming over here, and I'm going to school completely different. And I remember the first day of school, I didn't speak to anyone. I was just quiet. You're feeling lost. You're in the corner by yourself. You're just observing what's going on. Quite a culture shock at the same time. And then after that, a couple of weeks later, I remember the first thing that came out, I was like, oh yeah, he's a FOB. I was like, FOB, what does that mean? Obviously, this was in Romford, so trying to understand the English slang of it was a challenge, let alone everything else. And I remember like just asking myself, what does that mean? But I didn't have the courage to actually ask. So there was a few remarks that were made, and sometimes when you don't understand things, you just laugh at them, but you don't realize what it is until I plucked up the courage and asked. It was like, oh yeah, fresh off the boat. So
Okay.
I remember feeling really down about it, and I'm thinking, so I'm being treated different. One, because of my color, and then two, because of my accent, where it was on par with the Essex accent, and I was just withdrawn from everyone. I remember I only had one friend at that point. It took me about over a year to then really feel settled. And just because I felt different, I just felt I had to isolate myself from people.
Hmm.
So it was really a tough time. Like I said, I felt lost, and it was like, wow. I wanted to go home. I remember one time I went back to my mum's and I was like, look, I want to go back. And she was quite distraught, like, hold on, you've got a better life here, starting something new. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not for me. I had friends, I had family around me, I had people who understood me, people who understood, people who didn't treat me different. To now coming over here, the weather's cold, people were just not as friendly. So it was a tough time until you get used to it. You then get with the program, so to say, and you find a place. And then I remember going into college. That got a lot better because I went into college in London. So the ratio was quite neutral. You had a lot of white people, Asians, blacks, which felt more at home. And then got to meet fellow countrymen and stuff like that. So yeah, it was quite an unusual one.
Yeah, man. I guess that in itself is a culture shock. Like, and probably the question going through your young mind would have been, why? Like, if everything was so good, and now it's changed to weather being bad, not being around my friend. Like, the question I would have is why. So yeah,
100%.
that's deep. I'll jump in. For me, I didn't really have many experiences of like bad experiences, but I had experiences where I was aware that something was different. One was never had any problems like during like primary school or infant school or junior school, apart from one occasion where, and I've spoken about this before, where I couldn't have been no more than 6 or 7, where we're just playing a game, and then to pick out the person to start again when you do eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Well, instead of Tiger, that this young girl, some of those times you get kids where they come to the school and you don't see them for a few months and they come back again, like that kind of kid. And she has catch her N-word by the toe. And at that time, I didn't have a full understanding, like a proper, full, deep-rooted understanding of that word, but I knew that word wasn't good. I just, like, as soon as I heard it, it wasn't good. But the thing that, and relating back to T, where you just kind of laugh it off, is because there was no one around me to back me up, because I was the only black child there. But also, no one understood that word. I don't even think the little girl who used it, that's probably just something that she heard growing up, I guess. But from that point to point, I just felt it's like one of those movies where the camera just zooms in. It's like, okay, I know that this word's not right. No one else knows about it. So there's an ignorance from the person that's saying it, and there's an understanding. Okay, I'm a bit different. And that is probably the only kind of experience, like from the young kind of elementary years, like primary school, infant school. One funny one of my good friends to the good friend to this day, like 30 years of friendship. Growing up, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I remember one time he got really upset when he came to my house because he really needs to go toilet, like toilet, and he was getting upset, and I was going, "What's wrong? Why are you upset for?" And he said, like, "Because I really need to go to the toilet." And I said, "But what?" He said, "I didn't think black people done poos." And we were just sitting, I was laughing because like, I've never. But,
wow.
And he was getting really upset. But once again, as much as that was funny, and I still laugh about it today, there's still an element of, okay, well, now my best friend thought something different. Like, he didn't think people like me done a natural human thing. So as much as
So you did have a toilet, basically.
well, we did. That's what I mean. We had a toilet.
The thing is,
But even those little things, even
what
those
background was he from though?
he's white. He's like a white English boy. But we grew up together. They've done everything together. But when we came into it, I think it was when we came into each other's houses, where, like, you know how kind of Caribbean houses, you can't go in, like, well, for me growing up, you couldn't go in the living room. Like,
you can't go in the front room.
You can't go in the front room. Or anything like that. But I guess, but for me, and this is another thing, leaning back to what Kay said. Like, even growing up, like, the household was different. I'm not putting any downers on anyone else, but just to give insight, like, growing up with a Caribbean heritage, my mum was, everything had to be like prim and proper. It was like
proud.
You know what I mean? Buckingham Palace, and even the toilet. And I think
pride in the West Indian culture, isn't it?
And I think that itself is another podcast. But I think because the house was kind of in such a way where it looked like nothing was touched, because that's just how my mum was. I think my friend just didn't think like that toilet was ever used, the downstairs toilet. So he's getting really upset and saying, but anyway, I digress. But what I'm trying to say is that was another experience for me growing up, because I didn't have many kind of big ones until I got to high school. Then things started separating, and we started kind of being.
Can I just add a little bit on top of that?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, because what opened the doors up for me is this: if he went round his white counterpart's home, would he have thought, because the house is clean, that they don't have a toilet?
No, well, that's the
question I would ask.
No, but the statement was, I didn't think black people done the number two. Right. So that was the checkpoint there. From my experience, that's where it was like, okay, as much as
now, isn't that funny though, that he made a differentiation now, despite you being young and despite you not realizing you're black until you get certain experiences. He knew you were black though.
Yeah.
Despite being your best friend.
Yeah.
And despite that, he learned, and this is the key thing, he learned from somewhere. Kids don't just develop things from birth. You can't leave a child unnurtured, no environmental influence, no external influence whatsoever, and you can't just leave that child and they will suddenly de-envelop into a independent, thought-provoking being that is doing this and that and knows how things work and how to process and how to even speak words. They have to have interaction first. So in order for him to get to this stage in his life where he come around his best friend's home and say, I didn't think black people done poos, meant that he didn't see you as his equal, because his equal is his white counterpart who he could go around, and he knew they had a toilet. But his black friend, he didn't have a toilet. That's interesting.
No, because the toilet was seen, but it was just the fact of doing that action. So I see where you're coming from. I personally believe it was just the fact that if you're not around people that don't like you do start thinking, well, why, like, just flipping it on the other side, why am, like, there's obviously, like, I don't really agree with, like, people don't see color or children like you do, but if you've been brought up until a certain age, I don't know, if you get to the age of 5 or 6, or when you start getting into school and you haven't been around anyone else other than what you look like, you're gonna start, as a child, you're, in my opinion anyway, you're gonna naturally kind of start forming opinions of something. If you see something that you've never seen before, you're gonna start just having those. Your imagination is gonna run wild. So, but I see where you're coming from, okay. But I just think for that one, I don't want to say it was I want to say it's innocent, but I want you guys to understand what I'm saying. Like for me, that wasn't a negative experience. It was more of an experience to kind of
Yeah.
it kind of put me
You're
in my
intrigued.
It made me realize, okay, as much as the friendship is there, there's obviously still I don't know if barrier is the right word. I don't think that is the right
Disconnect.
word. Yeah, that's exactly the word.
Yeah,
Disconnect.
disconnect.
So for me, for my growing up, my school, I think those two experiences for me were where okay, there's a disconnect because one, when that girl used the N word and no one else around me backed me up or anything or knew it, that there's a disconnect there. And also when my best friend thinks that I wish I didn't, that I don't do number twos, there's a disconnect there. You know what I mean? So but that's a good point, and maybe that is something that we need to kind of maybe dissect a bit more in the future. Okay.
Yeah.
So just to cement your point there, I third agree with you in what you're saying about there's just a disconnection. So when I was in Africa then, where I lived, there wasn't really a lot of white people. We didn't see white people. And as I got to school then, I got to see more white people, and I was intrigued about our history and the colonialism around that. And one thing that I knew from history, what they used to say about white people when they came to colonize our country was they didn't have knees to black people because they had trousers. Yeah, simple thing that they had trousers, and they had never seen clothes around. It was, back then it was animal skin, but to them, the only way they could describe these people was, the people with no knees, because they couldn't see their knees because there was trousers covering them.
Yeah.
So do you get what I'm saying? So if you flip the coin, we had the same mindset or the same disconnection as that little boy of thinking, okay, you're different from me. So I'm picking out the difference. And now I'm imagining things because I see that you're different. Now I need to put it into context as to why you're different and how you're different.
But T, can I have some feedback there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just taking in what I'm seeing here now, and I know we need to go around and share all our school experiences, but
Sure.
with M's example, his friends saw the toilet, but didn't think he done number twos. You didn't see the knees, that's why you didn't think they had knees. That's a difference. He saw the toilet and didn't think they done number twos. You didn't see the knees, so you didn't think they had knees. Can
The
you see
context
there's the context is the same, but the differentiation, it isn't.
All right.
So I hear you, but what I'm saying is the first thing was the skin color was different. So when you see something is different now, you start to think things and assume things. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You start to then, it's just, for example, when we're little, I remember seeing a girl. I was like, how is a girl different? And then realizing that, okay, that's the difference. And you're fascinated by it. Like, oh, really? Do you get what I'm saying? So it's actually realizing, okay, this person is different, but now your imagination is running wild as to why they're different and how they do different things to you.
Yeah, you man are right. When it comes to like my schooling, I think the word is the disconnect, but my disconnect was unconscious until maybe the latter stages of primary school. I say my mother, she did well to raise me in a way where, I did see colour and I was proud. Do you know what I mean? I was proud, like to a point where I may have got myself into certain situations at schools with teachers or whatever when I get a bit older, but I don't come away from that pride at all. But the thing that happens for me at school was like, it would be my mother who would hear things other than me. So one time at my primary school, we had a school play. Excuse me. Yeah, we had a school play, and we were in the school library waiting around for our turn to come on. And we were there reading the book, and I must have got a book down, Funny Bones, I think it was, something like that series of books. Got a book down and reading it. And
big books,
yeah,
just saying.
Down a dark street in a dark, yeah. Anyway, got the book out, and a bit of mess was made. And we had this one teacher, I won't mention his name, but one teacher, he said, you lot always make noise, ain't ya? Yours lot, it's always your lot that do this. And at the time, I didn't I don't know, what's to contemplate or think too far into what he was saying. But
Of course not. You was at school. You're young.
yeah, I'm young. I must have been about year 4, if that, year 4, year 5. And at the time, I was like, that kind of flew over my head. But before I could even bend down to pick up a book and try to clear up this mess, my mum was behind this teacher.
Oh dear.
And those of you in this group who know my mother can imagine her distaste for said comments. And cut a long story short, it proceeded to having my mum come back into school, sitting down with the head teacher, with this said teacher, with me, talking about this incident. Now, that to me was when the penny dropped.
Okay.
You know? I think to myself, I don't know whether my mum did well to, I don't know, maybe put me in a bubble or let me experience as much as I could, but maybe not diluting it a little bit, just so I could be a child. She already knew what I got, but just she wanted me to be a child at the end of the day.
That's deep, you know.
Yeah. There, the penny dropped in that office, and I wouldn't say a part of me changed, but a part of me grew.
Okay.
And when I say that, like, I didn't walk nowhere with no hunchback no more. Did you know what I mean? This is like, I'm year 5. Do you know what I mean? I'm pushing on. I'm going into my teenage years. So that was a prominent thing for me. And things like that happened quite regularly at school. And like high school, we've all been in history lessons. It comes down to Black History Month. Do you know what I mean? And it gets to a point where teachers are asking the questions and the whole class is turning around looking at you for the answer. I think
that doesn't change as you get older.
Is that silence is 1,000 words? I say that one. You know, and I'm sure all of us have been in that position before, and I laugh and I think back to my mum again, and we had the same incident with another teacher in high school, history teacher, Scottish. Like, for those that know.
Yeah, of course, Colonial Masters.
No, it's not even that. Wait a minute. No, that wasn't even a reference to that. I know.
Nah, shots fired, man.
No, it wasn't even a reference to that. It was reference, like, obviously that you guys that went to my school know of a history teacher from Scotland. And yeah, my mum and her had words, and she never came back.
So did my mum and her.
Yes, there we go. And
these mums, these black mums.
That was at the end of one term, and she never returned for the following term. So, boy, it's one of them. And obviously, just to clarify, there was no violence, there was no aggression, or anything like that. It was a frank...
Why would you assume that?
True. It's conditioning.
There you go.
Yeah, so I digress, but yeah, there was none of that, and we moved on forward with that. And I said, I grew again from that moment.
Okay.
Yeah. I suppose it's just me then.
I've got to say my piece too.
Yeah, well, my experience at school was an interesting one, because I suppose it was quite. I enjoyed school, but my early years were quite. I think I was a little bit lost, because I'd come from a family where my mother was ill, and and because she was ill, kind of impacted my experiences through school as a young person, especially in my those formative years. And I suppose in a lot of ways, you kind of felt like I was a bit of a lost soul, because my mum was ill, and I suppose, like I say, it impacted my I wouldn't say the thought process, but like when you were a kid, it was almost as if, well, I was that kind of child carer. So obviously I was taking on adult responsibilities as a kid, but then when I was still that kid, but going to school. So my childhood experiences at school were kind of, I suppose I didn't enjoy it like a kid should. I suppose, to be honest. So I suppose, I struggle struggle to kind of equate it really, because I suppose it was such a long time ago. But yeah, I think I did enjoy school to a large extent, but like at the same time, I think you know,
You had a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah, I had a lot of responsibilities, and I think that it kind of, I don't know, it kind of skewed the way that you looked at things, because you know, when your mates are kind of playing marbles, you know, you're out, you know, your little 5, 6, 7-year-old kid, you know, you're playing marbles or whatever in the street, or even you get a little bit older. I remember kind of playing football one time. You know, I had 2 left feet, so I was never going to be a great footballer. They'd always ask me to go in goal. Cut a long story.
So you were the ones that got picked out last year?
Yeah, I was always like, oh, go on, then we'll go in goal, mate. All right, yeah, no problems. But anyway, kind of, I remember sort of, you know, doing those things and thinking and saying, look, okay, lads, I can't finish off the game because I'd had to go back and do a bit of caring. So like I say, I think I suppose it impacted. And then, you know, experiences in school, yeah, they were okay, but obviously I did have, you know, I think it manifested itself in a way that I suppose what would the right word be? A bit rebellious. You know, a bit of a rambunctious kind of
rude.
Yeah, well, rude.
Unruly. Unruly.
You know, the man that's why.
No, the man has done it fiercely.
That's
you
the
know,
word.
so I suppose it kind of manifested itself in that way. And I'd get into squabbles and stuff like that. But I suppose, you know, as I got older, you kind of find yourself. And from a racial standpoint, did I get any sort of issues, you know, with other kids sort of saying remarks about my skin color? Yeah, that did happen as a child. You know, I remember playing football and someone's like, you'd get the N-word hurled at you. But I think because of my strong character, I would always, I suppose, I'd fight back. I was one of those kids that, you know, if something was said and I knew it wasn't right, I think I'd try to settle the argument. And that was the way for a long time I kind of dealt with disputes. But I know it wasn't the right way. I knew it was the wrong way. And over time, you kind of you realize that you don't have to settle disputes that way. You can be a lot more, I don't know,
vocal.
You could be vocal. You could be diplomatic. You can be a lot more. You can be a lot more. You know, you can use your mind to be a lot more thoughtful in the process of trying to resolve sort of, you know, racial issues. But for many years, yeah, I would resort to fighting, and you know, because it was. I'm not saying I was a product of that environment. I'm not saying my father was a wild man, but was he? I don't know.
That's a story for another time.
What was it? But that's for another podcast. But anyway, I just think, you know, just a little flavour. But yeah, you know, it was interesting, but then in some ways, as a child, a little bit troubling, because obviously I think I couldn't, as a child anyway, I think the education and my experiences were massively shaped by my mother that wasn't well.
But can you see like that's, and this is one of the reasons, and I think listeners will probably hear this in every podcast. When you say about that's not the way, or it probably wasn't the right way to deal with things. So remember, you're the one that's being targeted for a certain reason, and your response is fighting.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind the country that we live in historically, you fighting, you're going to be one step away from a non-desirable outcome.
Very much so.
Because of the perception that you were the troublemaker.
Yeah.
You caused that incident. You're the aggressive one. You're the violent one. Yeah. And that's how quick. This has an essence of what we're trying to say about this, about why we name it this, is because
and I'll be honest with you. It was ironic when you mentioned that, because for much of my life, in my early life, I was definitely one step away. from, as you call it, an undesirable outcome, whether it be prison or some sort of, reform school or whatever you want to call it. But I think I probably was that one step away. But, I think as I got older, I met people along the way that kind of gave me different life experiences, let's say. When I was, in my 20s, you date someone. I remember dating some girl who, I don't want to sort of go off on a tangent, but I remember dating some girl who came from an upper middle class background. And to be perfectly honest, at that time, coupled with the things that were going on, I perhaps had low confidence. So I was like, I didn't think that I was deserving of this individual. It's a silly way to think of it now, but when you're 20 years old, I probably thought of it like that. But meeting particular individuals, I kind of it kind of took me away from my household, and it was like, oh blimey, people actually live like this. It made me look at things slightly differently anyway. And I think from that, that morphed into having more positive outcomes, and and looking at yourself differently as well.
Same. I hear that, man. Okay, cool. Boy, I've had too many, and it's horrible even thinking about it, if I'm honest. I don't want to think too deep into it because it's emotive for me, if I'm honest. It's really emotive, and it only brings out feelings of disdain and distrust and disgust for the group of people and who they represent culturally. Period. There's no more to say about it really. But if I focus on certain points, I actually remember when I was in was it infant school or was it preschool? One of them, I think it was infant school, or could it be junior school? My memory's horrible. You'll learn that soon. And I remember running. When you're running and playing as a child and stuff like that, and then you fall over, of course, and you graze yourself. And I remember grazing my arm. I remember grazing that. And a teacher, a white Caucasian teacher, came up to tend to me because I fell over and I scraped my arm. She was shocked that under my black skin was pink flesh. And this might be a shock to certain listeners now, that yes, under my black skin is pink flesh. I do not have brown muscular tissue. I do not have brown bones. It's only skin deep, which means it's surface deep. And that was when it really hit home to me. Like I knew I was black, but then I knew I was black. You understand what I'm saying? Like I knew I was black, but that situation made me know I was black. Jeez. This person who's a member is an adult, is a teacher, which means I come to her for education. Didn't know under my skin, I had pink flesh, just like her. So that was a massive thing for me. And I remember not going home and telling my parents. I remember not telling my brother because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I don't even know what I was embarrassed about, but that I was different, that there was a different expectancy because of my skin color. But that stuck with me, man. That stuck with me big time, man. Beyond that, the expectancy, this was a subtle racism. And if you're from similar cultural background as me, you might have experiences too. The expectancy to be the class clown. Now, that was my nickname for many years because I could make people laugh. And I still make people laugh to this day. It's my personality. But the class clown was attributed to me. Now, I always got top grades. Always. But I was called the class clown. Now, I done nothing different to my other counterparts who come from different cultural backgrounds. I done nothing different. Remember that part. But I was picked out as the class clown. The one to instigate unruliness within the classroom. Even though my counterparts done worse at times. They done worse than me. But because I stuck out like a sore thumb, because I looked different, I was the class clown. I was the class leader when it came to, not to positive outcomes, but I was the class leader whenever something went wrong. So the teacher would always, you know, when they're on the chalkboard writing and something goes on and they only hear, they can't see. When that teacher flipped their head around or his head around, I would be the first person they would look at.
Of
That went on
course.
for years. That went on for years. Yeah, even up until high school. Yeah, everyone knows what happened during the science class when a letter got sent home that I was apparently the group leader for the whole class going, okay,
Yep.
so I can apparently, me as a child can apparently control a 30+ classroom. So I need to get a letter sent home saying that I'm the leader. Or all right then, cool. Yeah. But beyond that, not only the class clown, so that comes into to entertainment, right? If you're the class clown, that means you're the entertainer. That's what we expect from you. Also, sport. I was expected to be the fastest runner. I was expected to be good at all different sports. No one ever expected me to be good in the classroom at academic level, yet I was always getting top grades. Yet no one ever attributed me as an academic.
I can relate to that. 100.
Which made me laugh because education was easy for me. And I'm not even being big-headed. It was easy. Just put your head down, read and remember. That's all that is. It's not a measure of intelligence. Education is a measure of memory. Whoever remembers the most during an exam wins. That's that simple. It doesn't mean you're intelligent, smart, or anything. It means you've got good memory. Funny enough, I've got bad memory now, but I guess that's my curse, right? But there you go. Yeah. But there you go. So what was attributed to me was being the class clown, the entertainer, and being good at sports, which once again is the entertainer. So where does that come from? Is what I was like, which also what was what.
See, that
I was
surprises
asking when I was young.
that surprises me though, because you know normally the class clown is the one who is struggling with their grades.
Yeah, normally, if the
oftentimes, you know what I mean. Oftentimes, the narrative is that person who's struggling with their grades tends to take up that mantle as the class clown.
But if you've got someone, that sticks out more than the person that is struggling, which is a different skin color, where it's easy to kind of direct your attention to someone that looks completely different to the rest of the class, that's when that mantra gets passed on from the actual class clown. That's a nasty thing to say, really, but you know,
I know what you're saying.
That term.
Yeah, cool.
If there's someone else that actually can take the heat more, or the teacher feels
they'll
more
pass it on to you.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, they'll attribute it to
your head just by the process of elimination. Your head is above the parapet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So when the teacher turn around,
but also it shows someone's mindset. Have you ever done a thing where you say, okay, I'm looking for a red car, right? You will see it. Everywhere you go, you will see a red car. Or if you ever bought a new car or you're thinking about buying a new car, you will see that car everywhere. So to me, that teacher's mindset was, you've been labeled already.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever, even if he wasn't involved, because you already been labelled, that's it. She'll just turn around and
black children anyway within the educational setting.
Exactly. So it's like, right, Kay, I know you're involved. How many times did you ever hear someone saying, I know you're involved? I can't prove it, but I know you're involved. You're like, what? I haven't done anything.
Right.
So to me, that's someone's mindset. Exactly. That's someone's mind. You already picked me out before anything. You already made up your mind about me, and that's it.
And the thing is, I wasn't saying I was the most easiest, well-behaved person in the class. I'm not going to say that by any means, but I spent quite a lot of my school time in the detention in my earlier years. Quite a lot of time during break time, I was standing in the school hall. Quite a lot of time, I even got moved schools because I was hanging around a bad lot. People who were apparently influencing me to do wrong. But the two things that stick out for me in my schooling year, which told me you're different, is when, as I said, when I grazed myself and the school teacher, white Caucasian, she came up to help me and she was shocked at the fact that there was pink under my skin. And as I said, it might come to a shock to listeners who don't come from our cultural background. And the second thing was the fact that I was expected to be a class clown and to be good at sports. I was not expected to be good at academic. even though it wasn't expected of me. The only people who ever expected me to be good at academics were my parents. Period.
Okay. Well, and that's like, I'm sure the listeners can see how already things are starting to shape. And that's crazy. And that's it's not unexpected because we've had to live that, but it's crazy to think from an early age these things are actually the fact that you said that you felt, I think it was ashamed or embarrassed not to even tell your parents, that creates a complex, that creates a complex within yourself. So you've got to live with that. So all these little things that are happening at these ages that we're talking about at the moment are shaping us.
Yeah, shaping your reality.
Exactly. Guys, there's one particular subject that I'm gonna omit from this discussion, which is relationships, because I think that is so complex. That needs to be probably one for itself. Switch over to part 2 where we continue the conversation.